in the shadowed corners of an obscure antique shop lies a sinister secret. Hawthorn Village, a model of eerie perfection. Its creator, a figure shrouded in mystery, left more than just craftsmanship behind. Among the quaint cottages and smiling figurines lurks a chilling presence, a cloaked figure with a skull face, an ominous sentinel over this miniature world. When Jonathan, a model village enthusiast, stumbles upon this enigmatic piece, he's drawn into a nightmare that blurs the lines between reality and terror. Unbeknownst to him, Hawthorn Village harbours a dark legacy, one that ensnares the souls of the living. In a tale where the collector becomes the collection, every detail hides a ghostly whisper, every shadow a lingering dread. Dare to enter Hawthorn Village, where the miniature is malevolent, and escape is but a fragile hope. Chapter 1. The Discovery of Hawthorn Village. In the heart of the city's antique district, nestled between a quaint bookshop and a fading mural, stood a peculiar little store, known to few but revered by collectors. Its window, cluttered with curiosities from bygone eras, had always drawn the attention of Jonathan Hargrove, a passionate model village enthusiast with an eye for the extraordinary. Jonathan's fascination with model villages began as a child, a magical world in miniature that he could control and bring to life. Over the years, his collection had grown, filling a special room in his modest apartment. Each village had its own story, its own charm, but Jonathan always sought something truly unique, something that whispered tales of yesteryears. On this crisp autumn afternoon, as Jonathan pushed open the creaking door of the antique shop, a peculiar sight caught his eye. Tucked away in a dimly lit corner was a model village, unlike any he had seen before. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each building meticulously detailed, each tiny figure brimming with character. But amidst the quaint cottages and bustling town square, one figure stood out like a shadow in the light of day. It was a miniature, cloaked man, face a haunting skull, an unsettling contrast to the otherwise idyllic village. The figure sent a chill down Jonathan's spine, yet he couldn't look away. There was an enigmatic allure to it, an unspoken story that beckoned him. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a weathered face and knowing eyes, noticed Jonathan's interest. "Ah, you found our Hawthorn Village," he said in a voice as old as time. "A rare piece, that. Been here longer than I can recall. The chap who made it, they say he was a bit of an oddball, loved his creations more than people." Jonathan was drawn in. The mystery, the craftsmanship, the oddity of the skull-faced figure, it was irresistible. Without hesitation, he purchased the Hawthorn Village, the shopkeeper giving him an odd, knowing smile as he wrapped it up. Back in his apartment, Jonathan carefully placed the Hawthorn Village among his collection. The skull-faced figure seemed to watch him as he worked, an eerie sentinel amidst the cheerful miniature people. He positioned the village so that it was central, its intricate details deserving of the spotlight. As night fell, Jonathan sat in his armchair, a cup of tea in hand, admiring his new acquisition. The miniature lights of the village flickered on, casting a warm glow across the room, but in the back of his mind, a question lingered. Who was the cloaked figure with the skull face? And why did it feel so unnervingly alive? That night, Jonathan's dreams were troubled, filled with whispers and the cobblestone streets of Hawthorn Village. Unseen eyes watched him from the shadows, and he could swear he heard the faint, distant sound of a bell tolling from the miniature chapel. The village was more than just a model. It was a story yet to be told, a mystery that beckoned him deeper. It's time for a quick scare break. As we linger in these shadowy realms, a small favour I dare to ask. If my tales of terror, and bring you thrills. Do not let our journey end here. Hit like, subscribe, and join our dark congregation. I must extend my deepest, most sinister thanks to those souls brave enough to support our chillin' journey. Your contributions, kindred spirits, are the lifeblood of our channel. They help me continue to craft the haunting tales that send shivers down your spine and keep you awake at night, pondering what lurks in the shadows. If you too find yourself captivated by our chilling chronicles and wish to help the channel, consider clicking the thanks button below. Your support, dear viewer, is not just a contribution. It's a lifeline that allows me to continue weaving these terrifying tales just for you. Let's embrace the darkness once more. Let's get back to the shadows. Chapter 2. Shadows among the miniatures. The morning light filtered through Jonathan's window, casting a golden hue over his treasured collection of model villages. With a steaming cup of coffee in hand, he set about his daily ritual of admiring and dusting each miniature world. His gaze lingered fondly over the charming streets and tiny, intricately crafted buildings. However, as his eyes settled on Hawthorn Village, a jolt of unease ran through him. The cloaked figure with the skull face was missing. Panic and confusion set in. Had he misplaced it? Jonathan meticulously searched around the village, hoping he had simply dropped the figure. After a fruitless search around Hawthorn Village, his eyes caught something chilling in another model set across the room. There, standing in a bustling market square of a different village, was the missing cloaked figure. How? Jonathan murmured, his mind racing with bewildered thoughts. Carefully, he picked up the figure, examining it closely. It was indeed the same one from Hawthorn Village. Perplexed and slightly unnerved, he placed the figure back in its original setting, ensuring it was secure. Shaking off the eerie incident as a trick of the mind, Jonathan decided to go for his daily walk, hoping the fresh air would clear his thoughts. The city was alive with the usual hum of activity, but Jonathan couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. As he strolled through a quaint street lined with old bookstores and cafes, he caught a glimpse of a cloaked figure across the road. It was oddly familiar, strikingly resembling the miniature he had just repositioned. Heart pounding, Jonathan quickened his pace, crossing the road to get a closer look. The figure stood still, its presence ominous, but as he neared, in a blink of an eye, it vanished, leaving Jonathan standing alone on the bustling street, bewildered and unnerved. Trying to rationalize the day's strange occurrences as a result of stress or lack of sleep, Jonathan headed home. The day had taken its toll on him, and he longed for the comfort of his apartment. Upon his return, a sense of dread washed over him as he looked over his model villages. Once again, the cloaked figure from Hawthorn Village was gone. His eyes frantically searched and found it, now positioned in a different model, a serene countryside scene. The figure stood at the edge of a miniature forest, its skull face eerily turned towards the direction of Hawthorn Village. Confusion and fear mingled in Jonathan's mind. This was impossible, he thought. Figures don't move on their own. He felt a growing sense of being part of something unexplainable, something that defied logic. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Jonathan decided to call it a day. He left the figure where it was, too tired to contemplate the day's mysteries any further. That night, as he drifted off to sleep, the image of the cloaked figure haunted the edges of his dreams, a silent, ominous watcher in a world of miniatures. Chapter 3. Nightmares and Realities. The night embraced Jonathan in its quiet fold, but rest was far from his reach. In his sleep, he found himself in a surreal, mist-enshrouded world. It was Hawthorn Village, his latest model, but unlike anything he had ever seen. The quaint charm was replaced by an eerie stillness, a ghostly version of his miniature creation. There were no other models, no tiny people bustling about. It was just him, alone in the fog. The streets of the village, now life-size around him, felt both familiar and alien. Jonathan's footsteps echoed on the cobblestone paths as he wandered aimlessly, the mist swirling around him. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the silence was oppressive. Then, out of the mist, he saw it, the figure of the cloaked man with a skull face. It was no longer a mere model. It was alive, its movements sinister and purposeful. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest, fear gripping him as he realized the figure was aware of his presence. In terror, he ran through the streets of the village, ducking behind buildings and darting through alleys, trying to escape the relentless pursuit of the skull-faced figure. The dream, if it was a dream, felt vividly real, each breath heavy with the damp, cold air of the village. "It's just a dream. I need to wake up," Jonathan whispered to himself, his voice shaking. He peered around the corner of a cottage, only to see the figure moving faster, directly towards him. Desperation set in as Jonathan pinched himself, trying to force himself awake, but it had no effect. He looked up in horror as the figure closed the distance, standing right next to him. The skull face was terrifyingly real, the hollow eye sockets seeming to stare into his soul. The shock of that moment, the palpable fear and the closeness of the spectral figure jolted Jonathan awake. His heart racing, he sat up in bed, gasping for air. The room was dark, the familiar contours of his bedroom barely visible in the moonlight. It took him a moment to orient himself, to recognize the safety of his own home. Driven by a need to confirm reality, Jonathan raced to his model room, his hands trembling. The early morning light cast a pale glow across the miniature worlds he had created. His eyes frantically searched for Hawthorn Village. There it was, peaceful and still in the dim light, but his heart skipped a beat when he saw the cloaked figure. It was positioned beside a small cottage, the very one he had hidden behind in his dream. A chill ran down his spine. Was it just a coincidence, or was something unexplainable happening? The lines between his dreams and reality were blurring, and Jonathan felt a growing sense of dread. What was this figure? Why was it haunting him both in his sleep and in the waking world? He stood there, staring at the village, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. Chapter 4. The Creator's Secret. Jonathan carefully lifted Hawthorn Village, turning it over in his hands. His heart raced as he scrutinized every detail, searching for answers. On the bottom of the model, etched into the wood, he found something he hadn't noticed before. Hawthorn Village, a model by Edmund Gray. Below the name, a chilling line of text sent shivers down his spine. Where souls live forever. He held the figure of the cloaked man with the skull face, examining it. It was a simple model, nothing outwardly remarkable about it, yet it seemed to hold a sinister aura. Jonathan replaced it with a sigh. "It must be me. I must be going through something," he muttered to himself, trying to dismiss the growing unease within him. That evening, determined to shake off the bizarre occurrences, Jonathan decided on an early night. He set up a soothing, 8-hour-long track of relaxing music from YouTube, hoping it would ease him into a peaceful sleep. An early night without worry. That's what I need, he told himself. But as soon as he drifted off, he was back in Hawthorn Village. The village was empty, wrapped in a ghostly mist that seemed to move with a life of its own. He wandered among the houses, drawn inexplicably to the church at the heart of the village. Inside, he discovered a diary, its pages yellowed with age. It was the diary of Edmund Gray, the creator of Hawthorn Village. Trembling, Jonathan read the haunting words. I have poured my soul into this ghostly model, so that in the future others will be attracted to the village. They will place the village close to them, and when they sleep, the village will drain their souls, giving me life to live beyond my years. One day, I shall be able to leave the village and walk once again amongst the living world. An icy chill ran down Jonathan's spine. Was this real? Was it possible to create a ghost village, designed to live after death? His heart pounded as he grappled with the terrifying possibility. Then, a loud slam echoed through the church. Jonathan turned to see the cloaked figure standing by the doorway. No! He screamed. The figure began to glide towards him, floating eerily above the ground. Panicked, Jonathan looked around frantically, but there was nowhere to run. Who are you? Jonathan cried out. The figure looked straight at him, its skull face more terrifying than ever. It was Edmund Gray, the creator of the village, his eyes hollow and soulless. Suddenly, another noise broke the silence, a loud, deafening banging. Jonathan awoke with a start, his heart racing. The sound was coming from his front door. He dragged himself out of bed, still disoriented and half in the world of his nightmare. He opened the door to a delivery man who simply said, "Delivery," before scooting off. Jonathan was left standing there, holding a parcel, his mind racing. He sat down, the parcel unopened beside him, unsure of what to do next. The lines between dream and reality were blurring, and the terror of the village and its creator haunted him. What was happening to him? Was it all in his head, or was there something more sinister at play? The questions swirled in his mind as he stared at the unopened parcel, the weight of the unknown heavy in the air. Chapter 5. The Turning of Tables. Jonathan sat, a 10-year-old boy, in the safety of his room, surrounded by his small model village. Earlier that day, he had been bullied at school, pinned down by larger boys who taunted him for his size. "You're so tiny. We're much bigger than you," they jeered, their slaps leaving red marks on his face. The cruelty of their words and actions imprinted a deep, painful scar in young Jonathan's memory. In his room, he stood over his model village, the miniature figures defenseless before him. Echoing the bully's words, he whispered, "You're so tiny. I am bigger than you," before his hand came crashing down on the tiny village, destroying the figures in a moment of misguided anger and hurt. Years later, in the present day, Jonathan stood over Hawthorn Village, his gaze fixed on the cloaked figure with the skull face. The memories of his childhood, the feelings of helplessness, and the recent terror mixed into a potent cocktail of emotion. "You are tiny. I am much bigger than you." He echoed the words from his past, this time directed at the figure that had haunted his nights. Without thinking, his fist came down hard on Hawthorn Village, shattering the model and the cloaked figure into pieces. A sense of power and relief washed over him as he collected the broken remnants and threw them into the bin. "We don't pick on smaller kids, and we don't get into people's dreams," he declared, a sense of finality in his voice. Feeling a weight lifted, Jonathan went about his day, convinced that the nightmare was over, that he had conquered his fears and the haunting presence of the village. He returned home late and entered his model village room, expecting peace. But there it was, Hawthorn Village intact, with the cloaked figure staring back at him. "Impossible," he uttered in disbelief. Anger surged within him as he raised his fist to smash the model again. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. He found himself in the model village, small, vulnerable. His room loomed large around him, a giant's world. And there, towering over the village, was a gigantic version of the cloaked figure, their roles reversed. Jonathan was now the tiny model, and the figure was the giant. Fear gripped Jonathan as he looked up at the looming figure. The giant raised its fist, mirroring Jonathan's earlier action. As the fist came crashing down towards him and the village, Jonathan's heart raced with terror. The realization hit him. This was the trap of Hawthorn Village, the curse of Edmund Grey, coming to its dreadful fruition. The village was not just a model, it was a snare, and he was now its captive, caught in a twisted fate of his own making. Chapter 6. The cycle continues. The bell above the door of the old antique shop tinkled, signalling the arrival of a new customer. The man, an avid collector of peculiarities and trinkets, stepped in, his eyes immediately drawn to the small model village, displayed prominently on a shelf. Intrigued, he approached the miniature world, his eyes scanning over the intricate details of the tiny buildings, the miniature trees, and the figures frozen in time. "This is incredible," he murmured. "The detail." His gaze then fell upon the unsettling additions to the otherwise idyllic scene, a figure of a cloaked man with a skull face and another tiny figure, seemingly screaming, looking upwards as if in terror. What's with the creepy skull figure and the man looking up and screaming like he's about to be crushed? He asked, a frown creasing his brow. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a knowing glance, merely shrugged. "Who knows what was going on in the mind of the model creator?" he said cryptically, his voice tinged with a hint of an unsaid story. "I'll take it," the man declared decisively, unable to resist the allure of such a unique piece. "Another one for the collection?" the shopkeeper asked, his tone casual, yet laced with something deeper. "Oh, yes," replied the man, already picturing where he would display it in his home. "But who is the real collector?" He mused loud, his question hanging in the air, unanswered. As the new owner of Hawthorn Village left the shop, the bell chimed once more, a sound that seemed to carry with it a weight of unspoken secrets. The shopkeeper watched him leave, his expression inscrutable. In the world of the miniature, within the confines of the cursed Hawthorn Village, the cycle had begun anew. The boundaries between collector and collection, between the captor and the captive, blurred and intertwined. Hawthorn Village, with its new addition, the tiny figure of Jonathan, forever frozen in a moment of terror, sat waiting, its legacy of entrapment and lost souls continuing under the guise of an innocent model village. As the door of the shop closed, leaving the shopkeeper in the dim light, surrounded by relics of the past, the truth of Hawthorn Village remained hidden, its story silently unfolding with each new owner, each new victim. The real collector, it seemed, was not the one who purchased the village, but the village itself, collecting souls, fulfilling the dark legacy of its creator, Edmund Grey. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey. If your thirst for the unknown and the unexplained is still unquenched, I invite you to delve deeper into the abyss of terror. Just beyond the veil of reality, another story awaits to send shivers down your spine. Dare to join me in the next video, where the unknown becomes known and the unseen seen. Until then, keep the lights dim and your mind open. This is Professor Shadow, signing off.